Grew up as a farmer in Winnebago County, and right outside our house was the Milwaukee Road that was coming from, now I'm blanking on the name, it obviously came through Freeport up to Beloit, started in Savannah. And I have a very vivid memory of watching the evening train go by with the lit passenger windows and people riding and reading the evening newspaper as they were headed either west to Freeport or into Beloit and on into Milwaukee. I ended up on the Winnebago County Board for 6 years, chaired the Zoning Board of Appeals, was interested in development issues. And one of the things that really bothered me is that Rockford at that time was the second largest city in Illinois and had no passenger rail service. I was elected to the Illinois House of Representatives in 1995, served there for 18 years. And I was sure that by joining the Midwest Legislative Conference, it was an amalgam of about 13 Midwestern states. They had a rail committee that I was sure that I was going to, in my eloquence, be able to convince Amtrak that they should add Rockford back onto their system on the Chicago to Minneapolis run. I was quickly disabused of that idea when they said, we'd like you to look at Milwaukee, which we already go through, compare its population to that of Rockford. You really can't compete as far as generating the number of butts in the seat as Milwaukee can, and we don't think it's a viable option. We're not going to run a train on odd days through Rockford and on the even days through Milwaukee. We're going to have people that are used to riding the Milwaukee segment, and that's the way we build ridership, through frequency and repetition. So I failed at that initially, but I did find out in my legislative career, we actually had a rail committee formed for a couple of years. Representative Elaine Eckritz from Northbrook was chairman. And because we had the emphasis on rail, that was a time when we were passing some major capital bills, and we were able to add on additional routes to Quincy, to Carbondale, and the Chicago to St. Louis run. We went for 3 times a day to 5 times a day on the St. Louis run, and we actually more than doubled our ridership because of the frequency. And it's a lesson that really drove home, is that if you can have frequent passenger service, it doesn't have to be super high speed, but it has to be frequent to drive a lot of ridership. So with that kind of background, of course, as a kid, I played around with the railroad quite a little bit since it was 100 feet from my house. So you have the little pens that you use in sewing, where you push those down on the rail and watch them turn into the little tiny swords, crossed swords, as the train went over. And I must admit that I flattened more than 1 or 2 Lincoln pennies on the railroad. So I won't tell some of the other stories of what young people can get up to when there's a railroad right next to them. But it was a formative and a very positive aspect. When I was in Europe in 1970 studying German, I was in a small town the size of Rockton, or probably 6,000 or 7,000 people, and yet they had daily train service. Little motorized units that could maybe carry 30 or 40 people, but they did have rail service, and that one is another image that I think that we are seeing today with the diesel motor units that are now becoming popular, that can serve smaller communities. That's returning to our roots of rail. That is probably the next step. Moving on to the service coming northwest from Rockford, we did see significant dollars from the Build Illinois program, not only to Rockford but to the Quad Cities. They will probably run into some issues with the costs in the Quad Cities. Signaling is going to be a major issue according to IDOT, but they are building a new station in Geneseo and have set aside funds for that service. $275 million was set aside in Build Illinois for the expansion to Rockford, and that's for the reconstruction, the engineering and reconstruction of infrastructure that's needed. IDOT is now in the process of selecting the operator, and this is interesting. It's not only Amtrak that's interested in this. They preliminarily are, everybody thinks that it will be Amtrak service, and they are very interested in offering twice-a-day service to Rockford. But Metra has also approached IDOT, and they think that it would be a natural expansion from their service that already runs to Big Timber, just west of Elgin. And the potential that Metra, because it is a more of a commuter rail system of frequent service being expanded. IDOT is not going to fund more than 2 trips a day initially, but if we see ridership that meets the expectations, the possibility that Metra then would continue to offer additional daily departures and arrivals, which drives service levels and drives ridership, there is that possibility with Metra being interested. And they have said that they anticipate a 90-minute travel time from downtown Chicago to Rockford, which, again, starts to compete pretty heavily with auto traffic. When you get tied up in downtown, if you're going to the Loop, you never can know for sure that you're going to make a meeting on time. I once was going to a bill signing with Governor Quinn of a bill that I passed. I left 2 hours and 20 minutes from my home, which is normally an hour and 50 minutes. And I hit traffic. I watched going spinning around, and I was half an hour late to the presentation, even though I started and gave myself an additional half an hour to travel. The auto traffic cost me an additional hour of travel time because traffic was so bad. IDOT is going to be doing a pros and cons analysis then comparing Amtrak and Metra, and they are already working on an agreement process. They just haven't filled in the line on who the agreement is going to be with, but they anticipate that project, including preliminary engineering and environmental planning. So there's 2 tracks. There's the operating agreement, and there's also the preliminary engineering that tells them which route they've locked in on the UP route. But that's going to take until the end of 2022, so another 18 months before they'll have the operator selected and the preliminary engineering done. Then it's approximately one additional year to finalize the final design and engineering at the end of 2023. Construction then doesn't start until early 24. So basically 3 years from now, when all the engineering will be done and we can actually start putting ballast on the tracks, repairing ties, changing curves if the curves are too sharp. Signaling is something that we haven't had to worry about with passenger rail running at those speeds. It's been a freight rail that's much, much slower. So probably 2 years of construction time before passenger service actually will start. Sometime in sometime in 2026 is our best guess at this point. One interesting aspect of the selection of the operator will be what kind of equipment do we use. Amtrak will probably be using the new Charger locomotives, which are lighter, more fuel efficient, faster acceleration and deceleration. So it won't be the old heavy freight locomotives that we've used to seeing the Amtrak service being. And Metra may potentially use diesel motor units, which are, even though they meet all of the federal crash worthiness for rail passenger equipment, they weigh about half of what the typical Amtrak consist weighs, something around 120 tons, 125 tons for Amtrak, and a consist that would have the same number of people on a DMU would be about half that, around 60 tons. There's huge fuel savings. You have a savings in crew, and your acceleration to deceleration into and out of curves and into and out of stations is much better with the much lighter equipment. What's the prospect then for west of Rockford, as reaching out as far as Waterloo ultimately? And this is what IDOT hired Quandel Consulting to determine. Quandel specializes in running and moderating focus groups, which are asking the question, what do communities want? What do they really, what do they see for passenger rail? And what level of support is there? Is there going to be any kind of operating support from cities, from counties along the route? Or is it going to be basically going to be whoever sits in the seats is what's paying for the service? They have a list of focus group attendees that already have been solicited. They anticipate an email going out sometime in the next couple of weeks for 6 separate remote focus groups, similar to what we're doing tonight, except the discussion will be wide open. They will be holding 6 of those virtual meetings in May, and the topics, including possible routes. If the CN turns out to be the tracks are in bad enough condition that they can't upgrade them at a reasonable cost, is there potential to run a new route? There are lots of old railroad right-of-ways around. Are any of those a feasible alternative? The economics of it, the safety benefits, and we know that of US 20 from Chicago to Waterloo, the only section that is not 4-lane divided highway is from Freeport to Dubuque, and the accident rates even make the news in Rockford with the accidents that have happened on US 20, the number of injuries and deaths. So safety benefits of rail is something that they will be looking at. What is the ridership level expected to be? What are stations going to cost? What are the rehab of tracks? And the operation, the fuel and the crews that are going to be running the trains, plus the capital expense of buying the train sets. All of these are summed up with a cost-benefit analysis. And there will be a second round of focus groups in October, a recap and probably addressing any questions that come up from the analysis of the first set of focus groups, and they hope to have a report back into IDOT by the end of December. And the whole impetus behind this is that the new Biden administration with their infrastructure plan has the possibility, if it is approved as introduced or something close to that, of being transformative in how Amtrak looks at its rate schedule, not rate, and at its schedule of service and its network throughout the country. This would be a natural addition through Northwest Illinois, since Illinois is already supporting the addition of the Rockford service. Simply extending it would be a natural expansion of the Amtrak network. And the planning that we're doing through Quandel and ultimately then through IDOT will position us that if there is a major infrastructure plan, that we would be in a good position to take advantage of that. Just of note, we have a couple of, one bill in the Illinois House Bill 399. It's out of committee and it's on the consent calendar. And what's interesting, as an Illinoisan, the change from Representative Mike Madigan as Speaker of the House to the new Speaker is fundamental. Speaker Madigan insisted on every bill being closely approved by him. He would not really allow much independent thought or independent leadership in the House. And Chris Welch has said, if a bill is made it out of committee without opposition and with no votes, why do we need to debate it at length on the House floor? They can set up a consent calendar, and given COVID, this is another reason for not extending debate for hour after hour. I suffered through many hours of mindless debate. So cutting the debate on every bill that is unanimous. Let's do this. The consent calendar is a recent addition. It hasn't been used in 20 years in the House. And we're hoping that this will go over to the Senate, where Senator Stottleman from Rockford will be the sponsor. And it sets up a commission to look not only at high-speed rail throughout Illinois, but at all passenger rail service, from the Metra and CTA service through bus lines, intercity bus, on up to Amtrak and potentially other long-distance operator. And we've seen in Texas, the Texas Rail Initiative is not being run by Amtrak. It's being coordinated. Their service will be coordinated, so when they are in the same station, the trains will be easy to go from one to another, but it's an independent operation. So this bill will allow a commission to be formed statewide to do rail planning, which we haven't done in decades. So something else to keep in mind. That's kind of my update on what the possibility is for expansion going northwest from Rockford.